Okay. The Bible inspection meeting. Oh, I want to get this done so bad! At Fifth Bell on the day before the meeting, Ferdinand arrived at the Royal Academy with Eckert and Justice to begin preparations. The welcoming students were waiting nervously in the common room, and after looking them over, he began to give his instructions. Riardo, prepare a room in which I can speak to Rosamond. Understood. Riardo left at once with Brunhilde and Tell, at which point Ferdinand turned to Wilfred and Charlotte, who were standing at the center of the gathered students. My being welcomed here is connected to the Trinus Profound incident, he said. As it remains a secret that Ehrenfest slew the beast, my arrival will not be widely known. You may rest easy and continue to socialize as I unilaterally resolve the situation. Keep the dormitory in order. Thank you, Uncle, Wilfred replied. We will. A guardian being summoned to the World Academy was indicative of there being an issue too great for the children to resolve themselves. Wilfred had stressed to the point of shivering about how massive the problem must be. Upon hearing that Ferdinand would handle it, a calm smile appeared to spread across his face. Justice, Ferdinand said, once my room is ready, ensure that preparations for the introductory tournament are progressing smoothly. As you command. As requested, Justice went to prepare a room for Ferdinand to spend the night in. Ferdinand glanced at him, then immediately focused on Hartman. Hartman, as the oldest art scholar of the apprentices, I ask that you take command of a team and prepare documents such that you may bring Justice up to speed at once. Hartman and Feline turned at once, having become used to doing tasks for Ferdinand while helping him at the temple, but the other apprentices scholars seemed dumbfounded and simply watched with wide eyes. Hartman clapped a hand on Roderick's shoulder on the way to his room. Shape up, Roderick. We need to hurry. Lord Justice works faster than you'd ever believe. Roderick came back to his senses and started chasing after Hartman, and a beat later, so did the other apprentice scholars. Riardo returned to inform us that our room was prepared just as the common room was getting busy. Rosamond, come with me, Ferdinand, and as we both followed Riardo to a small meeting room. He told me to be seated opposite him, so I took the chair that Layla had pulled out for me. He's going to get mad at me causing more problems for him. It's not your fault. I placed a hand on my stomach and furtively glanced at Ferdinand, whose face showed no emotion. This wasn't my fault. Not much, at least. But it was still an unshakable fact that Ferdinand was now wrapped up in nonsense he shouldn't have had to deal with in the first place. As this has to do with the Bible that only the High Bishop may use, then those unrelated to the temple must depart, Ferdinand said. Guards may remain at the door. Ferdinand, my boy, Riardo exclaimed, her eyebrows raised in a sudden flare of anger. You must not be alone in a room with Milady. Stand down, Riardo. This is not for others to hear, and every moment is valuable. My boy, she is an engaged woman. You must not put her in such an uncompromising situation. Allow her retainers to stay at the very least. From the position of a noble, her argument made perfect sense. It was actually quite strange that we had gotten away with so many one-on-one meetings in the temple. However, I could guess that Ferdinand wanted to talk with me about the magic circle that had risen into the air above the Bible. It was a topic of conversation much too dangerous for our retainers to hear. Ferdinand thought for a moment, his brow tightly knit, then nodded. Very well, Eckert and Cornelius may remain, but nobody else, he said, waving the others away. I would much rather you keep another girl with you, but I suppose family is more comforting, Riardo agreed and then exited the room. Once everyone was gone and the Dutch door was firmly shut, Ferdinand turned to the two guard knights. Both of you, stand facing the door. Yes, sir, Eckert said and complied at once. Cornelius, however, blinked and froze up. His training had instilled in him a habit of always keeping his eyes on the one he was guarding. Hurry up, Ferdinand barked. Yes, sir. Cornelius turned to the door as well, and with that, both he and Eckert were standing with their backs to us. Ferdinand took out sound-blocking magic tools and preferred one to me. And it was then that I truly understood the order he had given to the two guard knights. It seems that he didn't even want to chance our lips being read. He was being so intense that I couldn't help but feel even more anxious. Ferdinand, I truly am sorry. I was unable to expose their decision to investigate our Bible and summon you here, I said as I grabbed the magic tool. My aim was to establish my innocence before Ferdinand started grinding me to dust, but no sooner had I started to apologize than he waved a dismissive hand at me. No matter, it was well within expectations that I would receive a summons. In fact, I instructed you to include my name in your answer specifically to bring about this outcome. This is much preferable to the alternative of you facing the meeting alone. Thank you. At least you have Ferdinand there to keep you in check. Apparently, Ferdinand had predicted that one of my guardians would end up being summoned. I exhaled relief to know that he wasn't angry at me, and shifted my focus to the coming meeting. Still, I said, this has turned into quite a serious problem, hasn't it? I am unsure of what is problematic about it. What? What if someone else sees the magic circle? He had sounded so very serious when ordering me not to tell anyone about it. Surely there was a disaster on the horizon. Ferdinand crossed his arms and watched me through slightly narrowed eyes. That will not warrant any concern. If we cannot see the circle ourselves. In other words, you need only keep your mouth shut and say nothing unnecessary. I am here precisely to ensure that outcome. As not even Justice had managed to see the circle and the text, Ferdinand was under the impression that only those who met certain requirements could view them. Perhaps these requirements were to do with elemental affinities, divine protections from the gods, or mana capacity. He also assumed there was entirely different requirements on top of them, since there was no other explanation for why both Ferdinand and I could suddenly see them. I imagine that nobody else at the meeting will be able to see it for themselves, and if somebody does, what should I do? Nothing at all, for we cannot see ourselves. Those who can see it might foolishly read it aloud and make an enemy of royalty to no gain, or they might keep silent and just as foolishly aim to take the throne themselves. But that is their choice to make, and it does not concern us. You need only focus on not bringing harm to Ehrenfest. Now, feign surprise and say, you can see something in the air? It was then that I realized I already knew someone who had the potential to see the magic circle and who was honest enough that they would mention its presence outright. Prince Hildebrand attended the Turnishperfallen inquiry, I said. As a member of royalty, he is expected to oversee the resolution of any problems that arise in the Royal Academy. So he will presumably be attending this meeting as well. Do we need to worry about him potentially seeing the circle? Tell me, what issue is there with the son of a king being recognized as a true king? An outcome like that is trivial compared to completely unrelated persona, such as we suddenly receiving that kind of attention. On the chance that both Prince Sigiswald and Prince Hildebrand can see the circle, they may fight among themselves for the seat. If only one of them can see it, that individual can become king. If neither prince sees it, things continue as they are. I was still confused. Hildebrand had spent his entire life thus far being raised as a vassal. Learning that he had the qualities of a king would enliven his retainers and force him into a conflict with Sigiswald, who was already so close to being named the official successor to the throne. It would be disastrous and surly. So you say, but Prince Hildebrand was raised as a vassal, I said. He was only recently baptized and has yet to even be debuted. Should the investigation reveal that he has the qualities of a king, there is still time for his education to be adjusted, and as a child with Dunkelfogger blood, he has powerful allies. Prince Hildebrand would need to acquire the Gruchestein, of course. I am sure the current king can speak to how extraordinarily hard running the country is without it. Is it hard for a king to rule Jurgenschmidt without the Gruchestein, then? I would imagine it being similar to a new archduke coming into power after the abrupt death of their predecessor without having been taught about the foundational magic. The new archduke would need to mobilize their entire house to search for it while supplying it with mana from the hall. One can maintain the existing state while supplying mana, but that is all. One cannot repair or do anything else to it whatsoever. The lower cities in Twichelm had required direct involvement with the foundational magic, and Haas's monastery has similarly been built with Sylvester's permission. An archduke without knowledge of the foundation was hardly deserving of the title, and would not be able to use the magic entrusted only to archdukes. You sure are well informed, Ferdinand. As an archduke candidate yourself, you will also learn about the foundational magic soon enough. I highly doubt that Sylvester has every word memorized, but even he knows it. Ferdinand didn't seem at all uneasy about the upcoming meeting, although it was comforting to see. At the same time, I couldn't understand it. It was for this reason that I asked, are you not concerned about the Bible inspection meeting? We need only demonstrate 3 things. That the Ehrenfest Bible contains a prayer for the God of Darkness's blessing, that said prayer is not identical to the spell for creating black weapons, and that Ehrenfest students did not violate the king's law. As the Bible does indeed contain the prayer, we need only show it. His words reminded me that the true reason for the inquiry was to understand the Turnishperfallen incident. This investigation led into our duchy's Bible had only come about from the squabble between the Sovereign High Priest and the Sovereign Knight Commander. The state of the Sovereign Bible has nothing to do with Ehrenfest, Ferdinand continued. You need not concern yourself with the actions of the Sovereign Temple or the Sovereign Knight Commander. Hold on. Don't you have to worry about the Bible possibly being taken by the Sovereign Commander or the Sovereign High Priest, because all they have to do is see that prayer is there and realize they don't have the complete copy and realize, hey, we can take this and make it our Bible. Give it. Hello, is that not the possibility? It is the king's duty to contain them both or stir the conflict. To be honest, my only real concern here is you. Knowing exactly what we needed to do came as something of a relief. I had worried the situation was out of control, but it seemed that everything would turn out fine as long as I entrusted the meeting to Ferdinand. Very well, I said. I'm electing to leave absolutely everything to you while I spend the entire meeting in silence. I could not hope for more. Our discussion had come to an end after we ironed out some more details, and at precisely 3rd bell the next day, our meeting with the sovereignty began. The desks were lined up in the same formation as during the previous inquiry, but this time the Sovereign High Bishop was sitting next to Emmanuel. This was no mistaking him, since he wore the same white robes I was so accustomed to. Hearing the phrase High Bishop always brought Besenwa's to mind, but this man only looked to be about 40 and was more or less in his prime. This is Relishon, the Sovereign High Bishop, Emmanuel said. He has brought with him the Sovereign Temple's Sovereign Temple's Bible. Once greetings were exchanged, the meeting could begin in earnest. Robert stood up and explained in a booming voice that my statements during the previous inquiry had necessitated this investigation, to see whether the Sovereign's Temple Bible was indeed missing anything. Now then, Robert said, to begin, show us Ehrenfest's Bible. I wish to object, Ferdinand replied, standing up with the Bible in hand. You what? Robert said, blinking. The invitation I received said this meeting was a meeting to ensure that no Ehrenfest students violated the king's law during the Tischbefahren incident. Ferdinand continued with a very noble-like smile. Our intention today is not to investigate any potential shortcomings in the Temple's Bible. It seems that I have mistakenly attended an entirely different meeting. If it were me up there in place of the Knight Commander, Ferdinand probably would have said something like, have you forgotten our reason for being here, fool? Ferdinand stared down the Knight Commander with a smile, making it clear that Ehrenfest had nothing to do with the Sovereign Temple's Bible. Robert scoffed, but he quickly conceded that matter. You're not wrong. Now show your Bible so that we may prove Ehrenfest did not violate the king's law. As you wish, Ferdinand replied, stepping forward and setting the Bible down before Robert. He was wearing a thin fake smile for dealing with other nobles, but to me it looked absolutely terrifying. Rosemine opened the lock. After borrowing Herscher's hand to get down from my chair, I stuck my key into the Bible and opened it. The text and magic circle rose up into the air as they had done before. Blank pages, Robert said plainly, and with a grimace he flipped through the Bible. Herscher, who was standing here under the guise of assisting me, wore an almost identical expression. I could guess that she wasn't able to see the contents either. Goodness, Fraulein shrieked, we've come this far and you're bringing fake books? How sacrilegious. I see, Ferdinand said, making no attempt to hide his displeasure as he shot Fraulein a glare. I was starting to believe that the quality of graduates dropped following the Civil War, but I see now that the teachers are where the problem resides. I agree with his assessment, but wish that he had dressed it up a little more. Fraulein would no doubt take her frustrations about this incident out on me. Remain silent, Ferdinand continued. Incompetent fools who cannot stay quiet until the facts have been explained to them are nothing but a bother. Now to return to the matter at hand, it is only natural that these pages would appear blank, as temple Bibles can only be read by those with the relevant High Bishop's permission. Then grant all those here permission. Herscher said eagerly. That will not be possible, Ferdinand replied, crushing her hopes with a gentle smile. Only those who are part of the temple are qualified to read these Bibles. Excuse me? Whatever do you mean? Goodness, Fraulein added. Ferdinand gazed across the supervised professors and then continued in a quiet voice. These Bibles are not meant to be taken from their temples. But I am confident that showing them to a select few will suffice. Prince Hildebrand as the arbitrator, Commander Roblet, who participated in the hunt and also already knows the spell, and those who are served the temple. Lord Ferdinand, Herscher exclaimed. I could tell from the desperation in her eyes that she was more or less on the verge of crying out, Don't be so mean! Ferdinand sighed. As the God of Darkness's prayer grants similar effects to black weapons, it would not be wise to spread knowledge of it so freely. It is wonderful for professors to be so inquisitive, but there is another issue entirely. The spell for black weapons was taught only to the knights of duchies where it was absolutely necessary. Even scholars who wished to research the spell could not learn it without the king's permission. In other words, Ferdinand was being entirely reasonable, and the mad scientist professors were unable to protest no matter how much they wanted to. Rosemine, Ferdinand said, your permission. I nodded and then said, I permit Prince Hildebrand, Lord Roblet, Father Relation, Emmanuel, and Lord Ferdinand to read the Bible. How is Prince Hildebrand going to react? I watched the prince out of the corner of my eye. As a member of royalty, perhaps he could see the magic circle. Ferdinand had said this wouldn't be a problem, but I couldn't help my worrying. I see text now, Hildebrand said. Robert added, I didn't realize these Bibles were magic tools. Despite my concern, it would seem that Hildebrand was unable to see the floating text or magic circle. His purple eyes contained no surprise as he quietly waited for the page to be turned. Robert's expression barely changed at all, suggesting that he couldn't see them either. Now, I would request that you open the Sovereign Temple's Bible and grant them permission to read it further, and prompted the Sovereign High Bishop. Relation sent out a Bible that looked identical to ours, unlocked it, opened to the same page, and then granted permission to the same people. I was included among them, of course. Oh, I don't see a magic circle with the text. The text written in the Bible was the same, but nothing rose up from the pages and into the air. They're identical, Hildebrand observed as we went through the two Bible's pages one by one. He was right, aside from all the notes scribbled next to the prayers for the baptism ceremony, coming-of-age ceremony, and such in the Ehrenfest copy. Ehrenfest's Bible certainly contains many additions, Emmanuel said, squinting as he looked down at the pages. I believe the previous High Bishop wrote those, Ferdinand replied before I could even open my mouth. Old language often proves too complicated for commoners of the lower city to understand, so many parts are rewritten in common vernacular. Indeed, like cue cards for a TV show. So, where's the prayer for the God of Darkness's blessing? Roblet asked. I turned to a page that was pretty far into the Bible, where the lesser used prayers were generally found. Here, this part details the prayer in question. Emmanuel examined the page for a moment and then said, "Where? I see nothing at all." The Sovereign High Bishop looked equally as confused, so I assumed he wasn't able to see anything either. "It's right there," Roblet noted. "Hard to read since the language is so ancient, but the words can't be missed." "Yes, I can see it too," Hildebrand agreed, "although I would struggle to read it as well." "How far can the two of you manage?" Ferdinand asked the Sovereign High Priest and High Bishop. They looked at the Bible again and then indicated a section about halfway through, where the notes in the Ehrenfest copy began to increase in density. As these Bibles are magic tools, it is possible that some sections can be seen only by those with enough mana and the right affinities. Perhaps the Sovereign Bible is not incomplete, and this is instead a problem of mana, in which case it is only natural that an archduke candidate such as Rosemine will be able to read more. "Makes sense," Roblet said. He started flipping through the Sovereign Bible, but then paused halfway through, presumably because he could no longer see the contents of the pages. I was also unable to see past where he had stopped. Given that no single person here can understand more of the Sovereign Bible than the rest of it, we can assume that the Sovereign High Bishop's elements and mana capacity are responsible, as he is its owner. Ferdinand are now completely in the scientist mode. There is much we might be able to learn if we gather all the Bibles together and investigate them directly. I tugged on his sleeve and pointed at Herscher. "Are you the one forgetting why we're here now, Ferdinand? We need to prove Ehrenfest's innocence, not start comparing even more Bibles, right? You look so much like Herscher now." My silent prodding must have been heard, as Ferdinand coughed once and then seemed to regain his composure. The others were still focused on comparing the Bibles. "I can read Rosemine's Bible up to this point," Hildebrand said. But I can actually read a little more of the part here. I wonder why." "There is a small spot here that I can't see, but everything else on the page is visible. It stops here for me," Roblet added. It seemed that he could read a little further than the prince, but they both saw blank spaces on the pages. Maybe they lack an affinity for life? I tried to speculate what elemental affinities they had based on the blank spots. Hildebrand smiled at me and said, "How far can you read, Rosemine?" All the way to the end?" I got the feeling that such an admission would only cause problems, so instead I rested the troubled hand on my cheek and took a step back. Ferdinand stepped forward in my place. "Both Rosemine and I can read up to the same point as the Sovereign Knight Commander," he said, "so perhaps the limitation is not his, but Rosemine's." "Oh?" Roblet replied, raising an eyebrow as he compared the two of us. My heart started pounding in my chest. Perhaps he had realized that I was trying to leave all the actual speaking to Ferdinand? Ferdinand casually turned back to the page with the God of Darkness's prayer. "I believe we have established that the Sovereign Temple's Bible lacks the prayer, not because it's incomplete, but because the Sovereign High Bishop does not have the required affinities or enough mana to see it. This is further evidenced by the fact that our High Bishop and Archduke candidate has managed to confirm its existence." Roblet shook his head. "Unfortunately, the language here is so ancient that we can't yet say how it differs from the spell we normally use. I will assist with this investigation myself. Rosemine is an Archduke candidate, not a knight. There is no need for her to learn the black spell," Ferdinand said, then held out a sound-blocking magic tool to Roblet. Once they were both gripping them, he took out a staff and morphed it into a knife, then turned it into a black weapon while covering his mouth. "Oh ho, so that's a black weapon. This is my first time seeing one," came but one of many mutterings from those gathered. It seemed that even among sovereign professors, many didn't know the spell themselves. Ferdinand and Roblet spoke for a little while longer before Ferdinand canceled the blessing. Roblet then turned to the rest of us and declared that Ehrenfest's blessing was not the same as the black spell, meaning the Ehrenfest apprentice knights and I would not be punished for using black weapons. I revoked the Bible's permission I had granted, then closed the book and locked it again. Okay, done. We had safely navigated the meeting. I gazed up relieved, only to make immediate eye contact with Emmanuel, who was staring at both me and the Bible with fervous intensity. "Would it not be more fitting for Lady Rosemine to serve as the High Bishop in the Sovereignty rather than an Ehrenfest?" he asked. "We should have gotten Ehrenfest to send her over in place of those sorry blue priests from before." Ferdinand, what are you going to say here?" His gaze was so intimidating that I turned around, grabbed Ferdinand by the sleeve, and tried to hide behind his arm. Ferdinand noticed what was going on and immediately stepped forward to shield me. "Rosemine is an Archduke candidate and cannot be taken to the Sovereignty." "Ha!" he flatly replied, staring down at Emmanuel with cold eyes. "If you do not know even that much, priest, then you would do well to remain silent on noble matters." "I see," Emmanuel whispered, his eyes lowered. "Archduke candidates cannot be brought to the Sovereign Temple." Duh. Meanwhile, Religion was watching Emmanuel with harsh eyes, an expected reaction considering the man's indirect suggestion that he should give up his position as High Bishop. Ha ha. The professors of the Royal Academy were similarly regarding Emmanuel as though he were an outsider, while Roblet was looking between him, Ferdinand, and me in apparent consideration. The atmosphere was so prickly that I was internally thankful to have Ferdinand to hide behind. Thank goodness he's here. There's something terrifying about Emmanuel just now. Talk about scary. As I continued to hide behind his sleeve, ready to dash behind his back at any moment, Roblet and Roffin briefly summarized the differences between the spell and prayer. Then, once Hildebrand had granted his permission, the meeting was brought to a close. "We are finished here, Rosemine," Ferdinand said, turning with the Bible in his arms. I agreed with the sentiment that we should leave at once and promptly started following after him. "One moment, please," Roffin called out, interrupting our escape. "I wish to have a conversation about Lady Rosemine attending the night course." "No," Ferdinand replied, shooting him down before the discussion could even begin. "Rosemine has learned practically all that the night course offers through her effort to getting the one and only Angelica to graduate. There's no point in her attending classes." "But what about dinner?" Roffin protested. After not even a moment, Ferdinand flicked a sound-blocking magic tool toward Roffin, who deftly caught it. Ferdinand then said something before extending a hand and retrieving the magic tool. Roffin stared at me, his jaw dropped. "No way," he muttered. "That can't be true." "I have no cause to be untruthful," Ferdinand said. "Now speak of this to no one and cease inviting her to the night course. You will never receive permission from Ehrenfest. Never." And with that, he spun back around and briskly walked away. I was, of course, hot on his heels. "Ferdinand, what did you tell Professor Roffin?" I asked once we were back in the dormitory. "I simply mentioned that because of the Jareve, you are still unable to function without the assistance of magic tools. I often said that for various reasons, you have charms that must be kept on at all times. Unless he's quite a staggering fool, he will not attempt to recruit you again." A normal person would easily conclude that someone entirely dependent on magic tools was no match for the practical lessons of the night course. But there were some who reached the nonsensical conclusion that they were perfectly viable candidates as long as they could move. That was why Ferdinand had also mentioned that I needed to wear several charms at all times. They would activate during training and inevitably expose other students to danger, and we had no plans of removing them. "Professor Roffin will give up now, right?" I asked. I was still feeling a bit uneasy since I was painfully aware of what a stubborn man he was. Ferdinand raised an eyebrow and then scoffed. "Fear not, if necessary, I will put an end to his days as a teacher." "Wow, how is that supposed to put me at ease?" His words made me even more fearful, if anything, but it turned out Roffin was no fool after all. He never pushed me to join the night course again. Thank goodness. Oh boy, planning for the tea party. How far have I gotten? 26 minutes. Planning for the tea party. I had assumed that Ferdinand would return to Ehrenfest right after the meeting, but he and Justice first checked with the scholars regarding the introductory tournament, and then began instructing them to add new research to their presentation. "What new research exactly?" I asked. "Simple. Research regarding the Bible's prayers," Ferdinand replied. "I imagine Professor Herscher will descend upon you the moment I leave, asking for documents about the Bible so that she might learn more. You must shoo her away and inform her that the details will be presented at the introductory tournament. I do not want her summoning me over and over again." Ferdinand then started giving instructions to Hartman. It seemed that to solve any upcoming problems, they had fiddled with my notes to make them look more like research results. They started off as random notes I made while transcribing and comparing copies of the Bible. "I can't believe they are now fit to be presented at the introductory tournament. I guess it's a mad scientist for you. They live in a whole other world." "May I see them?" I asked. The research was on prayers that even a blue priest could see, and it covered water, fire, wind, and earth. Apparently the ideal timing to present this was next year when I started the scholar course, but since we couldn't exactly show the High Bishop's Bible at the introductory tournament, he had selected the safest bits from the transcription. "Still, who will we attribute this research to?" I asked. "I understand that I'm the most natural pick because I was raised in the temple. Your average noble never enters the temple and wouldn't have much opportunity to even see a transcribed Bible." "Hartman, of course," Ferdinand replied. "His extensive research into the legends surrounding the Saint of Ehrenfest will prove most useful, and if we claim that he only started it after becoming your retainer, it will explain the relative simplicity and crudeness of the results. Apparently the quality and quantity were too lacking for the documents to be put forward as the main research of a graduating student. However, since Hartman had already prepared some other research, it could simply be added on to supplement a supplementary degree. The only problem was that he would end up being viewed as a weirdo who frequently visited the temple for some reason. But that will not change much for me, as I am already known for being a Lady Rosemine devotee," Hartman said, delivering this unpleasant news with an uncomfortably pleasant smile. When did you become known for that?" I asked. "During your long sleep, Lady Rosemine." It seemed that after my accidental blessing while playing the harpsichord on my debut, Hartman had promptly begun spreading legends of my sainthood at the Royal Academy. These grand tales were founded in the explanation that Sylvester had given for nobles to understand. Okay, that explains why Prince Anastasius was suspicious about me when we first met. But you weren't my retainer at that point, were you, I asked. My mother scolded me for taking things too far and told me to calm down, to think carefully before acting. I ended up having to wait another year, but at that point I was already a retainer at heart. That's pretty similar to what Roderick said after becoming my vassal way before becoming my retainer. Why does it sound so different? Oddly, I don't think your son is ever going to calm down. After Ferdinand finished instructing the apprentice scholars on the Interduchy tournament, he gathered the Archduke candidates and their retainers. Now there was going to be a meeting about my upcoming tea party. I'll much rather be reading in my room, but I guess there isn't an option. Riarda was striving to get me out of my room to live a normal, noble life, while Brunhilde was overjoyed to finally have an opportunity to spread trends alongside of me, so I was having to attend at least the bare minimum number of tea parties. But aren't Ehrenfest books a hot topic right now, I asked? I'm still not confident in my ability to stay conscious, so I'd rather attend as few tea parties as possible. In response to my very reasonable point, Ferdinand presented me with a necklace embedded with several surprisingly large face stones. Wear this when attending tea parties, he said, and take your leave when these face stones are half dyed. The other duchies already know that you are sickly and collapse without warning. If you say that you feel unwell and are on the verge of passing out, any host shall permit you to depart. Letting me leave early was a lot better than the others than having to endure the trauma of me collapsing in front of them. Furthermore, according to Ferdinand, the color-changing face stones would make it easier for my attendants to evaluate my health. The mana in the face stones wouldn't even be wasted since we would repurpose it for spring prayer and the dedication ritual. Gee whiz, I sure am feeling like a battery charger. However, if you leave midway through, you will need someone there who can follow up without fail, Ferdinand continued. For that reason, only attend tea parties when Charlotte is also present, no others. Uncle, that would put too grave a burden on Charlotte, Wilfried said, evidently not keen on the idea. She only recently started attending the Royal Academy and is not yet used to socializing. Instead, should we not have Rosemine abstain from tea parties entirely until Charlotte can develop more experience? I could do nothing but hang my head. The tea party in the library was one thing, but I didn't want to force her to tea parties if doing so meant putting a burden on Charlotte. This is why I'm saying I want to stay in my room and read. Let me be weak in peace. I sighed, overcome with gloom, at the same time as Ferdinand gave his own exasperated sigh and glared down at Wilfried with frosty eyes. As always, you think only of what is in front of you and never of the future, he said. What? If we do not use this time to get Rosemine as much socializing experience in the Royal Academy as possible, will you not suffer more than anyone? You will need to attend the Archduke Conference as Ob Ehrenfest one day, and at this rate, you will need to bring a first wife who is incapable of socializing. Charlotte will not be there for you to rely on then. I appreciate that you care for your younger sister, but if you are going to be the next Archduke, you must always consider the full picture. You should drop to your knees and plead for Charlotte's help if necessary. Now it was time for Wilfried to hang his head. Charlotte, I believe you are exceptionally mature and thoughtful for your age, perhaps because you were raised beneath two highly unreliable older siblings. Ferdinand continued, I understand that this will place a heavy burden on you, but please accompany Rosemine to any tea parties. I would find it more of a struggle to invent new trends and introduce new industries to the duchy as my sister does, so I will do what I can when I can, Charlotte said, wearing a dazzling smile that seemed to exude ambition. Noble tea parties were replete with indirect language, and with all parties probing each other as deeply as they could. Under normal circumstances, as Charlotte's older siblings, we would accompany her to tea parties and protect her while she gained experience, yet here I was being the burden despite being her elder. Doesn't this make me a failure of an older sister? The thought alone was depressing. I wanted to be a reliable older sister like Thule, who always came up with new designs in advance, and was so thoughtful that she had even predicted that I would want more armbands. But no matter how much I tried, it seemed as though that would never be me. I would rather not inconvenience Charlotte like this, I said, so please allow me to stay in my room and spend my days reading. No, yes, that would minimize problems for now, Ferdinand replied, but did I not just explain how that will introduce more issues in the future? Are you even listening? You have no choice but to attend while planning ahead. All of a sudden, Riarda protectively stepped between us. I should ask if you are even listening, my boy. How many times have I warned you about this? You always resort to using harsh language, and I always tell you to think more carefully before you speak. You are coming across as much too cruel. Have you not been heeding my advice whatsoever? Ferdinand offered no response. Instead, he merely looked down at the floor. Upon seeing this, Riarda let her expression soften. Ferdinand, my boy, I know that you are doing all you can for Lady Rosemine, making magic tools and thinking up plans for her. But the way you speak is much too harsh for a girl who could not even enjoy talking about what she loves with her friends during tea parties, she continued, and then glared at Wilfried. And I can say the same to you, Wilfried, my boy. I understand that it isn't easy for you to continuously run around cleaning up after Milady's messes. But she does not collapse by choice. It is only natural that she would get excited when topics she enjoys are brought up. Imagine if you were told to suppress your happiness at all times, even when you win one of these Gwenin games you are so interested in. And imagine that upon failing to suppress your emotions, you were told to stop playing entirely. Wilfred gave me a timid look. Sorry, Rosamine, I didn't realize I was being so inconsiderate. Charlotte's here this year, and I don't need to attend tea parties for girls now, so I thought it would be better to have her deal with them instead. I nodded, even putting aside my potential malice or what have you. It was a fact that Ehrenfest would be much more peaceful without me attending tea parties. Riarda, would it not be in everyone's best interest for me to stay locked inside my room, I asked. Please don't feel so down, my lady. We attendants are at fault when we cannot plan ahead and ensure that you may enjoy tea parties to the very end. Riarda's words brought me back to reality. My brow had been furrowed in thought as I tried to come up with an excuse to stay in my room, but on the outside, I must have looked sad about not being able to attend tea parties. I was not feeling down, I replied. I understand all too well that you are always working hard and considering every avenue you can. In that case, milady, please give us more opportunities, Riarda said, sounding dead serious. We have no choice but to gain experience of our own. To work on identifying when your mana begins to overflow, how much overflow it's safe, and what we can avoid to ensure that the tea parties conclude safely. You have fallen unconscious during 2 tea parties now, so I understand your hesitance to try more. However, we cannot grow if we are not given the chance. Even during the library tea parties, when the discussion turned to exchanging books and your thoughts on them, we kept you stable by using face stones. Will you not try attending more tea parties with this necklace Ferdinand so generously prepared for you? My heart was moved a little. Indeed, even during the Bookworm tea party, things had been going pretty well until the palace library was brought up. I was certainly open to the idea of attending another as long as I wasn't forbidden from talking about books. After all, I'm still interested in hearing stories from other duchies and what people think about books in general. As if noticing this chink in my armor, Charlotte clasped my hands and gazed at me, her indigo eyes brimming with concern. Sister, I've been looking forward to attending tea parties with you ever so much. To me, your return from Ehrenfest was cause for celebration, and my hope is that we can attend your next tea party together. That's so adorable. As a big sister, how can I not go to a tea party with her now? Very well, we may attend the next one together, I said, and exchanged a smile with Charlotte. In that case, Ferdinand interjected, I suggest you plan a tea party with Dunkelfelger. Dunkelfelger, I repeated. You are closer to their Archduke candidate than any other. No, Lady Hannelore, you have exchanged books with her. She can keep up with your interests, and she has witnessed you collapse at tea parties more than once before. It should be safe for you to make a few minor mistakes in her presence. Wilfred abruptly stood, his expression hard. You misunderstand Lady Hannelore, Uncle. She is not at all used to Rosamund collapsing. Even last time she was so shocked that she is a woman of Dunkelfelger, Ferdinand replied, waving his hand dismissively. We may intend to exploit this for our benefit, but we can say with certainty that she has what it takes to do the same. Hannelore didn't come across as a scheming sort to me, but the history showed that Dunkelfelger women were quite capable strategists. So perhaps her demure conduct was all a farce? And I don't think it is. Poor girl. After listing off several more instructions, Ferdinand returned to Ehrenfest with his retinue. The apprentice scholars were extremely busy with their suddenly increased workload, but Hartmut seemed particularly lively, and Feline was desperate to learn as much as she could. Add on Roderick to that, and they looked as though they were having plenty of fun. We consulted Dunkelfelger about a tea party and received a positive response. They had ended up being the ones to invite us, since they wanted to discuss my modern translation of their history book. I'll do my best so they can permit me to print it, and so that I can ask to borrow the book I currently have for a little while longer. After putting on the necklace that Ferdinand gave me, and making sure we had our Aaron's Night stories, which we had printed in the temple workshop, after Aurelia shared them, I made my way to the Dunkelfelger tea party with Charlotte. Dunkelfelger's tea party room was very simplistic. The color scheme was a simple combination of blue and white, and there were no ornate carvings or fancy decorations. The main table was long with sharp edges, and in the corner was a statue of a high beast with a knight atop it. About as big as a small child. It was made of clear blue crystal and was carved so beautifully that I almost expected it to spring to life at any moment. It's simple and modern, but stylish in a way. It seems distinct from Klassenberg fashion. Although, I must admit, contemporary designs like this feel a bit unusual since Dunkelfelger has such a rich history to draw from. As I curiously looked over the room, Hannelore blushed with embarrassment. Plain, isn't it? Our duchy's places can very little focus on the decoration, and when coupled with our color being blue, and the season being so frigid, she trailed off and muttered about how the atmosphere and decor felt especially cold in the winter, a stark contrast to the summer when nights filled the room with pleasant uproar. I would argue that it reflects Dunkelfelger's practicality in quite a charming and efficient way, I said. I may not exude that adorableness that girls tend to love, but a gathering of knights would feel right at home here. The decoration positively exudes strength, needing it suits your duchy very well indeed. Hannelore blinked in surprise, looked around the room, and then nodded several times. A seat was suggested to me, at which point Hannelore took a demonstrative sip of tea and then bit into a sweet. In turn, I ate one of the Ehrenfest cookies we had brought with us. Once these opening formalities were over, I tried the sweets the Hannelore recommended to me. One seemed to resemble dried grapes covered in honey-flavored yogurt. Is this a Dunkelfegger specialty? I asked. Indeed, these fruits are called rorays. I prefer them dried, although adults tend to enjoy them more when they've been turned into vies. We generally served sugared rorays when in the Sovereignty and Royal Academy, but given your duchy's pound cake and cookies, we thought you might prefer these. I was glad to know the Hannelore had considered my preferences when choosing these sweets and nodded with a smile. Yes, these dried rorays are quite delicious. I had developed quite a taste for them. I think they could serve as the perfect complement to any pastry. Sister, Charlotte added, I believe they would be used to make a wonderful pound cake. Oh my, rorays and pound cake? That sounds delicious, Hannelore said with a dreamy smile. I nodded my agreement, and she instructed her attendants to give me some dried rorays once our tea party was over. Please do share your new creation with us when you're done. Yes, of course, I replied. You've got a new task coming up soon, Ella. Now, Lady Rosemine, Hannelore said, about your modern translation of our duchy's history. Have I committed some grave error, I asked. No, not at all. It was extremely well written. My brother even read it several times over. He was quite inebriated on the splendor of our history, so... I only knew Lestalot as an antagonistic jock, so it was extremely surprising to learn that he was an avid and a reader to go through the same manuscript several times. Even if this passion was inspired mainly by his patriotism for his duchy, I was pleased to see how much enjoyment he had gotten out of reading. That's one affection point for you, Lestalot. In any case, the Ob requested that we be allowed to transcribe the book for our own purposes as well, Hannelore continued. What do you think? The details can be discussed during the Interduchy tournament or perhaps during the Archduke conference. I opened my mouth, ready to agree here and now, but Charlotte spoke first. We shall discuss this with our Ob as well, she said with a smile. I believe it would be ideal for them to settle the matter between themselves at the Interduchy tournament. I thank you ever so much. Oh, I guess I wasn't supposed to give her my approval right away. Well, I didn't even get a chance to speak, so I'm still safe. From there, the conversation shifted to us sharing our thoughts on Royal Academy love stories. Hannelore had much to say. She thought it was wonderful. She wanted a man like this one particular character to offer her a face down, and she liked a selection of the stories in particular. The most surprising thing was that her favorite story was the one about Sylvester and Florencia. To begin with, one cannot help but support a man chasing after a woman who is both older than him and from a higher-ranking duchy, she said. I can only dream of someone one day speaking their love to me with such passion. Ouch. Hannelore's head over heels for Sylvester of all people. That's unexpected. Charlotte listened with a vaguely uncomfortable smile, aware that the story was about her parents getting together, and then said, I personally enjoyed this one about the apprentice knight. Not many men would stay so resilient after failing so many times, nor would they continue striving with much fervor to earn the hand of their one true love. This time Hannelore was the one wearing an uncomfortable smile. It was probably a Dunkelfegger story, and perhaps she knew whom it was based on. Although in this one, they kept losing all the way to the end. Incidentally, I am ever so glad that I was allowed to lend Ehrenfest books to others, Hannelore said, bringing up the book lending. I am now able to discuss them with my other friends as well. Do read this story as well, then, I said, leaping on the new subject at once. It was a tale about knights, taught to me by an Ehrensbach woman who went into Ehrenfest. I brought it with me in the hope that we can extend our exchange. You returned my book, Lady Hannelore, but I am sad to say that I have not yet finished transcribing the book I borrowed from you. Feline offered her new book to one of Hannelore's apprentice scholars, who looked at their lady for a response. Hannelore gave a curt nod, then turned to me and said, You really need not be so considerate, Lady Rose. My brother will gratefully accept. Okay, so I can keep borrowing the book? Yippee! As I made a victory pose on the inside, Riarda lightly rested a hand on my shoulder. I gazed down at my necklace and saw that the face stone Ferdinand had indicated was half dyed, meaning it was time for me to leave. Drat, and I still feel fine, too. As I dwelled on how little I wanted to leave, Charlotte likewise noticed how much the necklace had changed color. She rested a hand on her cheek, her indigo eyes trembling with concern, and said, You appear rather pale, sister. Are you well? Lady Hannelore, my sincerest apologies, but I believe I must leave for today, I said, placing a hand on my necklace while making no attempt to hide my disappointment. Would not want to collapse and trouble you again. I would not want to collapse and trouble you once again. Hannelore's expression clouded with worry. But of course, I would want you to not want you to put yourself for my sake. I pray that you rest well and feel better soon. Today has been truly delightful, I said. Please share your thoughts on the books with me again sometime. Charlotte, I leave the rest to you. Indeed, Sister, Charlotte replied. You may count on me. I said my farewells, then stood up and returned to the dormitory, leaving the rest to Charlotte. I made it all the way back to my room without collapsing, a sigh of relief. Her retainers did the same, although they seemed even more relieved than I was. To think Lady Rosemine could discuss books without collapsing immediately afterward, Lady Lislet amused. Indeed, Riarda said with a proud grin. She attended the tea party with her closest friend and came out unscathed. The meeting with Drawanko should continue just fine, my lady. I'm glad the two of you are so happy for me, but the tea party depresses me for another reason entirely.